When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I still remember that moment so clearly. The afternoon light was coming through the kitchen window. The smell of rice and chicken filled the house. I had just folded the laundry and placed it neatly on the couch. She stood in front of me with her arms crossed.
Her voice was calm.
Too calm. I think it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while. For a second, I thought I heard her wrong. This was my son's house. The same son I carried for 9 months. The same son whose tiny hand once held my fingers so tight. And now, I was being asked to leave. I looked toward the hallway, hoping he would step out and say something. Hoping he would say, "Mom, don't worry. You're not going anywhere." But he didn't. He stayed in the bedroom.
Silent.
That silence hurt more than her words. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. At my age, you learn that shouting only makes your heart heavier. Instead, I nodded. "Oh," I said softly. "If that's what you both want." She didn't say we. She didn't say his name. But I understood. That was the day I realized something painful. My son had chosen his wife over me. And maybe that day had been coming for a long time. And my name is Margaret. I am 68 years old. I have one son. His name is Daniel. Daniel was born on a quiet Sunday morning. It was raining outside. I remember watching the raindrops hit the hospital window while holding him for the first time. He was small, red cheeks, loud cry. The nurse laughed and said, "He has strong lungs. That's a good sign." From that day on, my world became smaller and bigger at the same time. Smaller because everything I did revolved around him. Bigger because my heart felt like it had doubled in size. His father passed away when Daniel was only 9 years old. A sudden heart attack. One day, he was at the dinner table, asking for more gravy. The next day, he was gone. I didn't have time to fall apart. Daniel needed school lunches packed, clothes washed, homework checked. At night, when he slept, I would sit at the kitchen table and cry quietly. But in the morning, I would smile again. "Good morning, sweetheart," I would say, as if nothing had changed. I worked 2 jobs for years. Cleaning offices in the evenings. Working at the library during the day. Daniel never complained. He grew up gentle.
Kind.
A little shy. He would hug me before school. "Thanks, Mom," he would say when I helped him with projects. Sometimes I would watch him sleep and whisper, "You're all I have." And I meant it. When he went to college, the house became too quiet. I kept his room exactly the same. The posters on the wall. The old baseball glove on the shelf. Every Sunday, he would call, "Mom, did you eat today?" I would laugh. Of course I ate. We talked about everything. His classes. His dreams. The future. He once told me, "When I get a good job, I'm going to take care of you." I didn't need him to take care of me. Just hearing those words made me feel safe. Years later, he met her. Her name was Claire. He brought her home one spring afternoon. She had long brown hair and a soft smile. She carried a small bouquet of flowers for me. "That's sweet," I said, surprised. She hugged me politely. "Daniel talks about you all the time," she said. At first, I was happy. That I truly was. I had prayed for someone to love him. Someone who would sit beside him at dinner. Someone who would remind him to wear a jacket when it was cold. Claire seemed educated. Organized.
Calm.
Maybe too calm. But I told myself not to judge. They dated for 2 years before getting married. The wedding was simple. I sat in the front row, holding a tissue in my hand. When Daniel looked at her and said his vows, I saw something change in his eyes. A different kind of love. A grown man's love. And that is natural. That is how life goes. Children grow. They build their own homes.
They
create new families. I told myself this again and again. Still, when they moved into their new house and asked me to stay with them for a while, I felt grateful. Claire said, "It makes sense. You shouldn't live alone." Daniel added, "We want you close, Mom." I packed my things carefully. I left behind the house where I had raised him. I told the empty rooms goodbye. I thought I was moving into warmth. I didn't know I was walking into distance. When I first moved into their house, everything felt new. New walls, new smells, new routines. I told myself this was a blessing. The guest room was small but neat. Claire had placed fresh sheets on the bed. A small lamp stood on the side table. "I hope you're comfortable," she said. "I am," I answered, and I meant it. The first few weeks were peaceful. In the mornings, I would wake up before them. Old habits never leave. I made coffee quietly. Sometimes I washed a few dishes left in the sink. I liked feeling useful. One morning, Daniel came into the kitchen, still half asleep. "Mom, you don't have to do that," he said gently when he saw me wiping the counter. "I know," I smiled, "but I like keeping busy." He kissed my cheek before leaving for work. That small kiss filled my heart for the whole day. Claire worked from home. She spent hours in her office with the door closed. Sometimes during lunch, we would sit together at the table. "How's work?" I would ask. "Busy," she would reply. She was not rude, just distant. I tried to find common ground. "I used to love gardening," I told her once. "Do you think we could plant something in the yard?"
She paused.
"I'm not really into dirt," she said with a soft laugh. I laughed too, though something inside me felt a little embarrassed. Maybe I was trying too hard. In the evenings, we would eat dinner together. At first, I offered to cook. Daniel smiled wide the first time I made his favorite stew. "Just like when I was a kid," he said. Claire smiled. Politely. "It's good," she added. But the next week, she began ordering takeout more often. "It's just easier," she explained. I stepped back. I didn't want to interfere. Little things started changing. Daniel and I used to talk after dinner. Long conversations about nothing important. Now, after eating, he would go straight to their bedroom. "Long day," he would say. I understood. Marriage needs privacy. Still, I missed those simple talks. One evening, I heard Claire's voice from their bedroom. The door was not fully closed. "We need our own space, Daniel." Her voice was soft but serious. "I know," he replied. "It's just, I didn't imagine living with your mother right away." There was a pause. "She won't be here forever," he said quietly. Those words froze me. Not angry, just cold. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I walked back to my room slowly and sat on the edge of the bed. I told myself not to overthink. Young couples need time. I understood that. I reminded myself that I had lived alone for years before moving here. Maybe I could find a small apartment again. But Daniel had insisted. "Mom, it makes sense. We worry about you." I didn't want to be a burden. That word began living in my mind. Burden. I started staying in my room more often. If they were watching television, I would pretend I was tired. If they were cooking together, I would say I had already eaten. Claire began rearranging the kitchen. My favorite mug disappeared into a high cabinet. The spices were moved. The pantry was organized in a new way. It was her home. I reminded myself of that every day. One afternoon, I decided to bake cookies. Daniel loved chocolate chip cookies since he was small. The smell filled the house, warm and sweet. When Claire walked into the kitchen, she stopped. "Oh," she said. "I just thought. I've begun. We're trying to eat healthier," she said gently. "There's a lot of sugar in those." My hands felt awkward holding the tray. "I didn't know," I whispered. "It's fine," she added. "Just maybe next time, check with me." Check with her. In that moment, I felt like a guest, not a mother. That night, Daniel ate 3 cookies anyway. He smiled at me when Claire wasn't looking. But he didn't say anything out loud. Silence again. Silence was becoming familiar. Days turned into months. Birthdays came and went. On my 68th birthday, I woke up early, hoping to hear footsteps in the hallway. Maybe a small surprise. Maybe breakfast together. The house was quiet. Daniel had left early for work. Claire knocked on my door around noon. "Happy birthday," she said. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a gift card to a grocery store. "That way you can buy whatever you like," she said. I thanked her. It was practical. Very practical. That evening, Daniel apologized.
"I'm sorry, Mum."
Work was crazy. It's okay, I told him. And I meant it, but something inside me had shifted. I began to notice how often they made plans without telling me. Dinner reservations. Weekend trips. I would find out when I saw their suitcases near the door. We'll be gone just 2 days, Daniel would say. I would nod. Have fun. The house felt larger when they were gone, but also strangely more peaceful. I could sit in the living room without feeling like I was in someone else's way. One night, while they were away, I walked through the hallway slowly. I passed their bedroom. The door was slightly open. I saw 2 pillows side by side. 2 lives woven together. And I realized something simple and painful. I was no longer the center of my son's world. That place now belonged to someone else. And maybe that was how it was meant to be. Still, knowing that did not stop the ache. The real change began on a rainy Thursday evening. The kind of rain that makes everything feel heavy. Daniel came home late. Claire was already upset about something at work. I could feel tension in the air even before anyone spoke. I was setting the table when Claire said quietly, Daniel, we need to talk. Tonight. He looked tired. Can it wait? No, she answered. They went into the living room. The rain tapped softly against the windows. I did not mean to listen. But when voices rise, walls become thin. This isn't working, Claire said. What isn't? Daniel asked. I didn't imagine our marriage like this. I feel like I'm sharing you. Silence. Then his voice low and confused. She's my mother. I know, Claire replied. But I need my husband. My hands trembled slightly as I held a plate. For the first time, I felt something deeper than embarrassment. I felt fear. Not fear of being yelled at. Not fear of being unwanted. But fear of losing him completely. That night, no one mentioned the conversation. We ate dinner quietly. The rain continued outside. And I knew, deep in my heart, that something important had started to break. After that rainy Thursday, something in the house felt different. Not louder. Not colder. Just tighter. Like the air itself had less space to move. Claire began closing doors more often. Their bedroom door stayed shut. Her office door stayed shut. Even the laundry room door was kept closed, as if privacy had become more important than comfort. I tried to move more quietly. I walked softer. I washed dishes slower. I kept the television volume low. I did not want to disturb anything. One morning, I overheard Claire on the phone. I love Daniel, she said softly. But I didn't think I would be living with his mother forever. Forever. The word stung. I had only been there 8 months. 8 months in the house I helped him afford. 8 months in the home he once said was mine too. But I said nothing. Daniel became quieter too. He no longer kissed my cheek in the mornings. Instead, he would grab his keys and say, "See you later, Mom." Small change. But I noticed. One evening I decided to speak gently. We were all sitting at the dinner table. The plates were half empty. The room felt heavy with unspoken words. Daniel, I began softly. Maybe I should start looking for a small place again. His fork paused in the air. Why would you say that? He asked. Claire looked down at her plate. I just don't want to cause tension, I replied. You're not causing tension, he said quickly. But his eyes did not meet mine. Claire cleared her throat. It's not about tension, she said calmly. It's just every marriage needs space. I nodded slowly. I understand, I whispered. But understanding something does not make it hurt less. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I remembered when Daniel was 5 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. He would run into my room and crawl into my bed. Don't leave me, he would say. And I never did. Now I was the one lying awake, afraid.
But there was no one to run to.
The small incidents began stacking up. One Saturday morning, I washed Daniel's shirts along with my clothes. I had done that his whole life. Claire saw them hanging on the line outside. Oh, she said, her voice polite but firm. I usually wash his things separately. I'm sorry, I answered quickly. I didn't think. It's okay, she interrupted. Just please ask next time. Ask next time. Again. I started asking before touching anything. Can I use the stove? Is it okay if I vacuum? Do you mind if I sit here? The house felt less like home, more like permission. Daniel began staying later at work. Or maybe he just came home later to avoid something. One night, I tried to talk to him alone. He was sitting on the back porch, staring into the dark yard. Everything okay? I asked gently.
He sighed.
I'm just tired, Mom. I sat beside him. I don't want to make your life harder. You're not, he said quickly, but his shoulders were tense. Claire feels overwhelmed, he added after a pause. With me? I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. She just wants time with her husband. That word again. Husband. I looked at him carefully. Are you unhappy? I asked. He shook his head.
No.
I feel pulled. Pulled. Between mother and wife. Between past and future. Between loyalty and love. I placed my hand over his. You don't have to choose, I said quietly. But even as I said it, I knew that sometimes life makes you choose anyway. A week later, the tension became visible. Claire had invited friends over for dinner. She didn't tell me until that afternoon. I didn't think you'd want to join, she said kindly. It's just some coworkers. I can stay in my room, I replied. That would probably be best, she said.
Probably.
That evening, I sat in my room while laughter filled the house. I could hear glasses clinking, music playing softly. Once, I stepped into the hallway to get water. One of her friends saw me.
Oh.
Is this your mom? The woman asked Daniel cheerfully. There was a short pause. Yes, he answered. Just yes. Not my wonderful mom. Not the woman who raised me.
Just yes.
I smiled politely and returned to my room. That was the night I cried quietly into my pillow. Not because I was angry, but because I felt erased. The final push came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Daniel had gone grocery shopping. Claire and I were alone in the house. I was folding towels in the living room when she sat across from me. Her hands were clasped tightly. Margaret, she began softly. My heart began beating faster. Yes, I need to be honest. I folded the last towel carefully. I appreciate everything you've done for Daniel. Truly.
Her voice was calm.
But I can't build my marriage like this. I stayed silent. I feel like a guest in my own home, she continued. And I need my husband to myself. The words were not shouted. They were measured, controlled, which made them harder. I never meant to make you uncomfortable, I said quietly. I know, she replied. And I'm not blaming you. But the meaning was clear. Something had to change. And what are you asking? I asked gently. She took a breath. I think it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while. There it was. The sentence that would change everything. The one I would remember for the rest of my life. I waited for Daniel's car in the driveway. I hoped, deep down, that when he walked in and heard what she had said, he would say,
No.
She stays. But hope is a fragile thing. And sometimes, it breaks quietly. When Daniel walked through the front door that evening, he looked tired. He set the grocery bags down on the kitchen counter. Hey, he said softly. I was sitting at the table. Claire stood near the sink, drying her hands on a towel. The house felt still. Too still. Daniel, she said gently. We talked. He looked from her to me. Something in his eyes told me he already knew. I folded my hands in my lap. She thinks it would be better if I stayed somewhere else, I said calmly. He closed his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. And in that small pause, I understood more than I wanted to. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't shocked. He had been thinking about this too. Mom, he began, his voice low. I waited. I don't want you to feel unwanted. Unwanted. Such a careful word. But Claire and I need space to work on our marriage. There it was. Not anger. Not blame. Just a decision. I nodded slowly. So, you agree? I asked gently. He didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, looked outside. Finally, he said, I think it might be best. Just for now.
Just for now.
Words people use when they don't know how long something will last. Or when they do. I felt something inside me settle. Not break. Settle, like dust after something falls. I understand, I said quietly. Claire looked relieved. Daniel looked torn. And I felt very calm, strangely calm. Sometimes when pain is deep enough, it becomes quiet. That night, I packed slowly. I folded my sweaters carefully. I wrapped the framed photo of Daniel as a child in a towel. The house was silent except for the soft sound of drawers opening and closing. Daniel knocked on my door once. Do you need help? He asked.
No, y answered gently.
I can manage. He stood there a moment longer. I never wanted it to be like this, he said. I looked at him. I know, I replied. And I did know. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't heartless. He was just a man trying to hold two loves in one heart. And one of them had to step back. I was the easier one to move. I had always been strong. I had always sacrificed. It was easier to disappoint a mother than a wife. That is something many sons learn, even if they never say it out loud. The next morning, I carried my suitcase to the front door. Claire stood nearby. Thank you for understanding, she said softly. I smiled politely. I hope you both find peace. Daniel drove me to a small apartment across town. It was clean, quiet, empty. He carried my suitcase inside. I'll visit, he said quickly. Of course, I answered. He hugged me before leaving. The hug felt shorter than it used to. After he drove away, I stood in the middle of the small living room. The walls were bare. The air smelled unfamiliar. For the first time in many years, I felt completely alone. Not because I had no one, but because the one person who had once needed me more than anyone no longer did. I sat by the window and watched cars pass. Hours went by. The silence felt heavier than the boxes around me. I didn't cry right away. Tears came later, when the sun began to set. When the sky turned soft pink and gray. That was always my favorite time of day. I whispered into the quiet room, I gave you everything. Not as a complaint, just as a fact. And maybe that is what mothers do.
We give.
And give. And give. Until one day, we are asked to step aside. The first week passed slowly. Daniel called once. How are you settling in? He asked. It's peaceful here, I said. That was true. Peaceful can also mean lonely. He promised to visit on Sunday. But Sunday came and went. Claire isn't feeling well, he texted. I replied with, that's okay. Take care of her. Because that is what mothers say, even when their hearts ache. I began building a small routine. Morning tea by the window. Short walks in the park. I met an older woman named Helen who lived down the hall. She invited me for coffee one afternoon. You just moved in? She asked kindly. Yes, I replied. Family nearby? I smiled softly. Yes.
Nearby.
But not close. One evening, about 3 weeks later, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Daniel. His voice sounded different. Tired. Mom, he said, can I come by? Of course. He arrived 30 minutes later. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes looked older. We sat at my small kitchen table. He stared at his hands. Claire and I have been arguing, he admitted. I listened quietly. She says I'm distant, he continued. She says I'm not present. I felt a gentle sadness rise in my chest. Are you? I asked softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, I feel guilty. For what? For sending you away. The room was very quiet. I reached across the table and touched his hand. You didn't send me away, I said calmly. You chose your marriage. Tears filled his eyes. I don't know how to balance everything. I nodded. Marriage takes work, I said gently. So does being a son. He looked at me like he was still that little boy afraid of thunder. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I replied. And again, I meant it. But knowing someone doesn't mean to hurt you does not erase the hurt. That night, after he left, I sat in the dark for a long time. I realized something important. The real pain wasn't leaving the house, it wasn't packing my clothes. It wasn't even Claire's request. The real pain was this. I was no longer his first home. And maybe that is how life moves forward. Children grow. They build new centers. And mothers must learn to stand on their own again, even when it feels like learning to walk for the second time. After that night, something inside me became quieter. Not empty, not bitter, just steady. For weeks, Daniel visited more often. Not every Sunday, but sometimes on Wednesday evenings after work. He would bring groceries, or fix a loose cabinet door, or simply sit across from me and drink tea. We didn't talk about Claire much, but I could see the strain in his face. He looked thinner, more tired. One evening, as rain tapped softly against my apartment window, he said, "She thinks I'm still choosing you." I looked at him carefully. "And are you?" I asked gently. He shook his head slowly.
No.
"But I feel like I'm losing something either way." That is when I understood something important. He wasn't choosing one love over another. He was struggling with guilt. And guilt is heavy, especially for a son raised by a single mother. I had always been strong for him, but maybe my strength had also become a silent weight. Maybe he felt responsible for my happiness. And that is not a burden a child should carry forever. A few days later, I made a decision. I invited Claire to visit me. Just her. Not Daniel. When she arrived, she looked surprised. "I didn't expect you to call," she admitted. "I know." I smiled gently. "But I think we should talk." She sat across from me at the small kitchen table. Her posture was stiff at first, guarded. I poured tea for both of us. "I want you to know something," I began calmly. "I never wanted to stand between you and Daniel." She looked down at her hands. "I know that," she said quietly. "I love my son," I continued. "But he is your husband now, and that matters." Her eyes filled with tears. My own rhythm, my own peace. Claire had planted flowers in the yard. "I remembered you liked gardening," she said. I smiled warmly. "They're beautiful." During dinner, Daniel laughed more freely than I had seen in months. He seemed lighter, and I realized something. When I stepped back, I gave him space to grow. Not away from me, but into his own life. One quiet evening, sitting by my window, I thought about everything. The hurt, the silence, the packed suitcase, the empty apartment. And I understood something that took me many months to see clearly. The day my son chose his wife over me was also the day he stepped fully into adulthood. It was painful, but it was natural. Children are not meant to stay under our wings forever. They are meant to build their own nests. And sometimes, mothers must let go twice. Once when they grow up, and again when they marry. That second letting go hurts more, because by then, we have fewer distractions, more memories, more quiet. But letting go does not mean losing love. Love changes shape. It becomes softer, less demanding, more patient. One afternoon, Daniel hugged me tightly before leaving my apartment. "Thank you for understanding," he whispered. I held him for a moment longer. "Thank you for coming back," I replied. And in that moment, I did not feel replaced. I did not feel forgotten. I felt at peace. There is a quiet kind of strength that comes with age. Not the strength to lift heavy things. Not the strength to argue loudly. But the strength to sit with pain and not let it turn into bitterness. I did not lose my son. That is something I had to repeat to myself many nights. I did not lose him. I just lost the role I once held in his life. And that is not the same thing. There was a time when I was his whole world, his safe place, his answer to every fear. Now, I am part of his world, not the center. And that is how it should be. But knowing that does not mean it feels easy, especially when you are older, especially when your days are quieter, when the phone does not ring as often as it used to, when you sit by the window and watch the sun move across the floor. You begin to think. You remember. You ask yourself small questions. Did I hold on too tightly? Did I depend on him too much? Did I forget to build a life outside of motherhood? Those questions are not accusations. They are reflections. Because when children grow, mothers must grow again too. Even at 68, even at 70, even later, life does not stop teaching us. I began volunteering at the local library 2 days a week. It felt familiar. The smell of books, The quiet aisles. Children would come in after school. Sometimes I would watch a young mother help her child choose a book. I would smile, and I would feel something warm instead of something painful. Because love does not disappear. It simply changes rooms. Daniel and Claire still visit. Not every week, but often enough. Sometimes we share dinner. Sometimes just coffee. Claire talks more freely now. She tells me about her work, her worries, her hopes of having children one day. And when she does, I listen. Not as someone competing for love, but as someone who understands what it means to build a family. One evening, Daniel said something that stayed with me. "Mom, I used to think loving you meant always putting you first." He looked thoughtful. "But now I understand that loving you also means trusting that you're strong." I felt tears fill my eyes, because he finally saw me not as someone fragile, but as someone whole. And that mattered more than being first. If you are listening to my story, maybe you're a mother too. Maybe you have felt that quiet shift. That moment when your child builds a life that does not revolve around you. It can feel like rejection, like replacement, like being gently moved to the side. But I have learned something important. We are not being replaced. We are being repositioned. From caretakers to witnesses. From protectors to quiet supporters. And there is dignity in that. There is grace in stepping back without anger. There is wisdom in allowing your child to struggle, to learn, to love, without feeling guilty for it. Love that demands to stay first becomes heavy. Love that blesses and releases becomes strong. Sometimes I still miss the old days. The small hand holding mine. The bedtime stories. The simple "Good morning, Mom." Those memories live with me. They do not hurt anymore. They simply glow softly, like photographs warmed by sunlight. I still sit by my window in the evenings. I still watch the sky change colors. But now, when the light fades, I do not feel empty. I feel full. Full of years. Full of lessons. Full of love that has stretched, bent, and reshaped itself, but never disappeared. The day my son chose his wife over me was not the end of our story. It was the beginning of a different chapter. One where I had to choose something too. I had to choose peace over pride, understanding over control, and quiet strength over silent resentment. And I am glad I did. Because today, when my son hugs me goodbye, I do not wonder if I am second place. I simply feel grateful that I am still part of his life. And that is enough. If there is one lesson I would leave you with, it is this. Raise your children with love. But also raise yourself with independence. Let them build their homes. And when the time comes, step back with grace. Because love that survives change is the deepest kind of love there is. And at this age, I have learned something very simple. We do not lose our children when they grow. We lose only the version of them that needed us every moment. What remains is a quieter love, but sometimes quieter love lasts the longest.